protocol. Part of the NVIDIA Inception program and Farfetch Dream Assembly laureate, New Life connects blockchain AI governance to deep learning, sustainable development, and financial inclusion into one social networking app. Soufiane, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Lars, for the great introduction. Before I start, I would like to just make a little remark, which is that I'm so amazed by all the talks. I've been listening to all of them, and I find it quite fascinating the way social media kind of ignore this kind of level of quality, let's say. So social networks are designed for attention, and people who are the best at attention, TikTokers and so on, are currently the ones owning that attention. And I'm very excited to work on kind of solving that problem, because I believe that social networking today is designed in a certain way. It's a bit random. It happened that people who built it started from the concept of advertising. It could have been something else, and now it's very exciting to see that we are getting into this something else. So I brought with me a quick presentation that is usually used for investors and so on, but I will try to make it more, let's say, insightful, but I will use it as like kind of visual media. So I'm gonna load my screen up. And so one thing that I would like you to remember at the end of this presentation is the concept of social 3.0. So the New Coin Protocol is the blockchain arm, let's say, of our startup. To give you a bit of background, so I come from different aspects of the creative economy, but the last one, the one where I spent 10 years as a publisher, that was extremely interesting for me, was fashion. And there is actually a pattern between fashion and all the other forms of innovation, where there is a magical thing happening when there is a consensus between creators that builds a trend. Because fashion, like anything else, and I can take parallel of AI or blockchain, all those concepts are constructs. They are not necessarily valid by essence. They have been built by communities of people who can agree around some standards. So they form new jargon, new business models, new concepts, and then they start building on top of those concepts. And so fashion kind of has this thing, but in a very primitive and visual way. Meaning that without realizing it, you walk in the street, you see people passing, you see the way they dress, it gets somewhere inside your brain, and all of our brains are forming a graph, a giant graph that stores all this data about, let's say, memories of visual cues that we get by associating outfits with ideas, with codes and so on, and every country, every city has their own codes, every community. I'm always smiling when I hear people saying, I don't care about fashion, because by saying that, you actually care, but also because look at any, developers, for example, are the main ones who say that they don't care about fashion. And then you look at them, they have the same open source Docker t-shirts, and they have those stickers on their laptops, and they have a certain expectation of how a developer should look like. They may have sometimes a ponytail or a beard and certain shapes of glasses and so on. So we are kind of all trapped into this like visual exchange, and so the same happens in everything, and blockchain is again a beautiful example. And so when people come together and create a new technology, then they start to create new models, new constructs. So for example, if you look at the internet, the concept of Web 2.0 that was just discussed just earlier, all those concepts are kind of made up while people are building, and they kind of get to a consensus. Same for like DeFi. DeFi is quite interesting because it has at the same time something that's like short, simple, but it also has the word, defiance, or in French we say défier, which is to kind of rebel or to kind of threaten or challenge, let's say, a power in place. So sometimes those things happen because there is a number of reasons that are not really structural, and it's just brands and concepts. And so what we have been working on at New Life is trying to solve a major problem, which is that the real creators, and so I would include everyone here in this room. The real creators are ghosted by social media. So social media has defined a law of gravity where they're primitive, everything is around attention and clicks and ads, and so that's the reason why they do anything is how their main primitive is how do we get people to click more, to spend more time on screen, and so on. And as I said earlier, it doesn't have to be the only way. Those metrics, those traction metrics based on retention and screen time and all those things are, again, arbitrary. It could have been something else. So what we have been working on is trying to define how we could value creative value in a way that is not based on the amount of views or the amount of likes or this kind of metrics. And the problem is very big. We believe that it's potentially trillions that are locked, that are hidden by those social networks that prevent us from seeing the unseen behind the TikTokers and behind their equivalent, because I blame a bit TikTok, but actually on Twitter it's the same, on Facebook it's the same. The posts that are the most controversial or shocking or whatever, and it kind of creates sometimes unconscious, behavior, the development of cognition mechanisms that push people towards that, and creating the content that kind of radicalize people and take them into those extremes, and all the challenges of social media that we all know. And so the solution is this idea of social 3.0. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we have those constructs that are very important to surf on. So if you are a fashion designer and you create a collection, you have to be aware of what the rest of the fashion industry is doing. And so the kind of things we have been working on is mechanism design at the intersection of AI, algorithms, and the formation of those consensus around trends. So this is the New Life app. This is the old version. We are working on the new release. We have been working on it for the last year. So this is like the legacy, but it will give you an idea. So I look at something, I give my feedback by pressing the screen. You see a green bar, and I tell basically people what I think about what I see. And the more I like, the longer I press. And if I like it a lot, I go to 100%. And then the AI will extract some components, and I will fill this data. So I will say, for example, I like the gloves, and I like this and this. And so we have a standardized format where we collect all this data about what people like, and we are able to use that data not to target people with advertising because it's completely ad-free, but to create a vault for intellectual property that takes all the trail of how the mind of creators is converging towards this or that direction. So instead of having a model where two people will decide the value of something, which is kind of the art model, we are more similar to the music model or the fashion model, where it comes from the consensus of many people. And so we believe that this technology can be extremely useful to add as a mechanism on top of the NFT space. And then we started to get deeper into the crypto space because suddenly it became a thing that, the creative economy, it's a thing. We were working on that since 2016, and it was very difficult. We were talking to investors from the crypto space, and they would not understand because for them, back then, crypto was just for payments and things like that. And we were telling them, but imagine if all those cool kids around the world start to adopt crypto, don't you think it would bring the mass into crypto? And they were like, no, it's just finance, just technology, something that's in the background. And so we were very excited to see the rise of the NFT space and the creative space in crypto. And so the question for us was, okay, we have this great mechanism, this great technology and so on, but this is not really something that the crypto space is adopting. And so following the same logic as for the fashion industry, what were the major trends around crypto? And we saw three main ones. I would say DAO, obviously. A lot of them have been launched in the last 3-4 years that are very successful and that are actually operating a lot of decisions being made by those people. The second one is obviously the NFT standard, which has produced lots of economies, not only in the art, but many forms of scarcity-driven economies. And then the third one is the DeFi model, which is obviously the biggest trend of the last few years. And so we were thinking, how can we apply those standards, those processes, into this concept of creative value? And so the main thing that we found in common between those things were the fact that they all had this common denominator that they were very social. So if you look at an NFT, without the community, without the social UIs where you can navigate and so on, it wouldn't be the same. NFT is a post on Instagram where the owner actually has value that's being compound, as opposed to just trying to catch attention. People will spend more time, look at them, appreciate them, instead of just scrolling super fast. And it's deep value and deep ownership of content for social media. Then you look at DeFi, it's people who gather around social-like interfaces, and instead of clicking likes, they actually make moves that have money attached, and so it's much deeper than just again browsing and liking. So it's much more also emotionally loaded. But at the end of the day, it's kind of the same. It's people interacting around interfaces. And the third type is the DAO, and the DAO is obviously a social network where decisions are being made. So we were thinking a lot of the problems that we tried to solve since the beginning of New Life were around using the best mechanism design to redistribute creative value across creators based on peer-to-peer valuation. So when you look at the New Life app, what we are doing is using algorithms such as PageRank, where instead of having the people with the highest amount of likes being more valuable, it's more the expertise and how people reach consensus. So we looked at how to use data and how to use all those cues in order to have scoring systems that were relevant. And obviously in the blockchain, it's much heavier, it's much lower, but it also has the great advantage that it's Sybil resistant. You need to put money where your mouth is, which brings a completely new dynamic. And so the way Social 3.0 is structured, and the idea we are pushing forward is it's a social network where every content is an NFT, and the cloud of the profiles is a stake pool where people can buy a pool token by staking tokens in there. And then where all the policy around content and so on is not decided by an opaque organization that decides like God who should be allowed to speak and who should be allowed to own their content and data, but it would be actually democratically driven on a peer-to-peer basis by the users. And so we have been building this protocol. What's amazing about it is that it's a premium proof of stake in the sense that it's not only people who have the most money that will get to decide who can run nodes, but it's actually people who have the highest value locked in their pool. So again, people will have to take the risk to bet on a creator because they believe that that creator will increase in value. They will spend the time to review that content instead of just scrolling and trying to get this like flashy thing that attracts your attention. They will really take the time to look at every content posted on those social networks. And I said social networks because New Life is the first one, and we want people to be able to create their own. So there will be an unlimited amount of UIs that will be at the service of the user. So instead of having users being like, let's say, serfs on land that they don't own and having to like comply basically with the rules of the big master, Jack or Mark. It's more people who will actually have their content, they will have ownership of their content, they will have ownership of their intellectual property, their data and so on. And the apps will be here to provide a service to them. So it completely flips the relationship the other way around. And the idea is that all those apps will try to design their own algorithms, they will try to design their own policy, and there will be a free market of apps trying to be the best at decentralized moderation and this kind of stuff. So we were heads down for quite a while. We just went to the crypto space back in May, June, trying to raise a bit of funds. So we raised about $1 million. On our platform, we have people who are, let's say, deeply involved in the, I wouldn't say legacy creative economy, because you have basically three main creative economies. You have the creative economy as in obviously the crypto native, which is the one that is currently dominating in crypto, all the crypto punks and all the things that were discussed today. Then you have the mainstream creative economy, which is really mass and based on attention and advertising and sponsors and things like that. So all the like Beyonce and all those like big celebrities. But then you have another space that is less known, and it's actually the equivalent of the crypto space, but for creators. And it's all the insiders who actually produce the trends that will be adopted in the next 5 to 10 years. So when you look at hipsters, for example, the concept of hipsters has spread across the globe, and now everyone in the world is a hipster. But back in the 2002, 2003, it was maybe, I don't know, 5 guys in Montreal who started Vice magazine, for example. And the same happened with the streetwear culture. Now you see everyone is starting to wear caps and hoodies and stuff, and it's like, yeah, hip hop culture and so on. But this big wave started somewhere around 2010. So you have people who start this ripple, and then that ripple will influence the world, and it just happens later. And those are the people that we have on our platform. So some of them work behind the scenes, so they are working at luxury groups and so on. Some of them are a little bit famous, like Grimes, who became very famous recently in the last few years. And some of them are, the people who make the graphic design for Balenciaga and these kind of brands. And so they use the platform to kind of search for consensus with others, because the Instagram and those platforms are extremely noisy. You have a lot of like content that you don't want to see, especially when you are trying to flow and trying to have a high density of innovative content. That's the reason why people use our product so far. So we believe it's a big market, 100 billion in terms of the creators around the world and how they monetize. So if you look at the landscape today, so we didn't put everyone, we put the major players. So you have on one side people who are building decentralized social networks. Some of them have been around for a very long time. I find it funny that suddenly everyone wakes up about decentralized social networks. Steemit has been around since maybe 2015 or something. So those models are not new, but new ones are coming. This is the latest, which is BitClout, basically, who opened their model to more app developers. And then you have the more, let's say, tokenizing existing cultural capital. And so when you look at platforms like Foundation or Luxo or Flow, they actually bring in things from the real world, like NBA or like Chanel or all those brands into the crypto space. And so we are sitting somewhere in between, where we don't want necessarily to be a general purpose smart contract platform. It's very formatted. So there is one format for all the apps. It will always be the same. but we are very specialized in that segment. So for example, where DSO would be more on the Twitter game, and what are the other ones? It feels like most of those platforms are actually targeting specific segments of the space, and our segment, I would say, is more adjacent to Instagram and all these like fashion people. So our team is made of pretty senior people on the technical side. Vitaly was writing papers about decentralized system in the I think early 2000. We are also very lucky to have Erika, who was the managing director of Facebook in Europe, and she was dealing with public relations with the European Union and things like that. And so she knows very well all the problems around regulations and compliance and so on. We have Prema from MIT. Tony is a friend who's consulting brands like Prada and so on. So he kept doing the things that I was doing before, but he's now fascinated by crypto, and it feels now the fashion world is extremely interested by crypto. Something big is about to happen. And we're also very lucky to have Mihaela, who worked at the social impact at IOHK with Cardano. So to give an idea of how it looks like, so we have three main layers. We have the SDK for app developers, where they can come and build an app out of the backend that we provide. We have New Graph, which is something that is a bit unavoidable. So it's a bit intellectual challenge. When we talk about decentralization, there are things that should be decentralized. There are things that, when it comes to the ownership of the content, the ownership of the private keys and so on. But I do believe that an efficient application running on-chain still needs to have the kind of behavior of Web2. So for example, the ability to recommend content, to retrieve data very fast, to personalize experiences and so on. So we have still this AI layer that is running, but again, the AI layer is working as a servant of the user, not as, and it's actually interchangeable. So if an app developer doesn't like it, they can just build their own, or they can, other players can come into the space and provide those capabilities. But we believe that that layer is mandatory, because when you see basic internet consumers, they just expect that it will be like Instagram and TikTok. They would not go back to the internet 1.0 where you had to like surf by yourself for hours to find the content that you like. And then the new coin that provides all the smart contract capabilities. So, okay, here the slide didn't work, but it was explaining a bit the tokenomic. And yeah, so I don't know if it's 15 minutes, but I don't want to go too deep into my time.